To begin with, I would like to thank you for coming to listen to what I have to say about moment forming and integration. It would be useful to spend a few moments on explaining what I mean by a musical moment. When certain characteristics remain constant for a while, a moment is going on. In musical terms, when sounds occur in a certain region, certain register, or in a region of certain dynamics, or of certain average speed or tempo, then these characteristics determine the moment. A limited number of chords in the field of harmonic construction, of intervals, which means measured distances between pitches in the melodic construction, of durations in the rhythmic construction, of colors in the coloristic construction. When these characteristics change all of a sudden, a new moment begins. When they change very slowly, a new moment is going to begin, and the present moment is still going on. If we are in this room tonight, the measures of this room, the number of participants in this meeting, to a certain extent the quality of the people, all these components determine this moment. When you leave this hall, one by one, starting right now, and the last one would leave this hall after about 2 hours, when I'm going to leave, approximately, then the change from this moment to the next moment, which is the moment of going home or going somewhere else, will be very slow. Whereas when all of a sudden this floor breaks or there will be an explosion, then the moment changes to the next moment very quickly, abruptly. The degree of change is something that can become the quality which is considered during the act of composing, rather than what is changing. I can, for example, compose with a series of degrees of changes, or we can call them degrees of renewal, and then start with anything and follow the degree of change from 0 to a defined maximum, and then reach something else. Reach at something else. That is, as I understand, the moment forming. I form something which is as unique, as strong, as present as possible. Or I experience something. And then I can decide as a composer, or also as the person who experiences, how quickly and with what a degree of change the next moment is going to occur. Momente is a composition which I started in January 1961 And during the first week, I designed and wrote all the sketches for the overall plan for the formal process. For those who know the works that I composed before, it will be very clear that all the determinations have not just fallen from the sky, but they were prepared here and there in other works. For example, the controlled randomness of the form, or the mobility of the form as compared to an immobile fixed object. I will explain what that means. There are three groups of moments, so-called M moments, in which the melodic characteristics are predominating. You see here on this board letters, before all in black color, and the first group up to here is always determined by a capital M in the beginning. There's a center which is just pure M. There's an M with a D index, an M with a K index, and derived from these, there are always a pair of other combinations. They are the melodic moments, the M moments. Horizontality, heterophony. For those who do not know what I mean by heterophony, or what we usually mean by heterophony, heterophony is a way of articulating sound events around a line. I say around a line because let's say you have any line. And then this line can be just a glissando. But, I mean, the speed is not defined. This would be just 2 seconds, as I performed right now. Now, heterophony means that more than one sound source, let's say voices, instruments, can produce this line at the same time. And they will never be completely synchronous if they are not following the same synchronizing device, like a clock or a beat or counting device. So they will all, for example, do something like this, etc. Well, the third one, so there is something happening as the result of the interference of several lines trying to go in parallel, which will produce something that is no longer a clear line, but a heterophonic event. Now, if this is not simply happening by chance, but in a very controlled way, like in, let's say, in a lot of folklore music, then someone is, let's say, playing this line with little sustained notes. Another one is playing this line with dots or little groups. Etc. You see more and more that in such a process the line can have any thickness. And now from the beginning on, I could start defining how thick the line is, the melody is in certain moments. And then this space can be filled with all sorts of activities. I mean, the space between the black line and the green line that I have just drawn. So all this can be filled out. It's still a melody, but it's heterophony. Hetero means many. Phony, Phony means to sound together. So it could be all filled out. You find this in Balinese music, for example, very often, or in Vietnamese music, in folklore music. Also in our music, nowadays in particular, where composers write a melody and then make the melody more or less wide. I wrote heterophony here underneath the group of the M moments. It's still the horizontal. Then there's a second group which is called the K moments. That comes from the German. It means Klang, sound, verticality. Everything that sounds together. Control of spectrums, sound spectrums. Chordal control, homophony, which means the control of vertical layers is involved. Homophonic music. K, Klang. A third group is based on D, duration. Dauer in German, it's the same. Like melody in German also means melody. Dauer. And moments which are primarily based on principles of dealing with measured durations, all of different lengths, produces two very important characteristics of any musical construction. One is silence, and the other one is polyphony. Polyphony, which means the combination of more or less independent layers which are simultaneously combined, which is sounding simultaneously. And I would like to explain this. When I have this line here, and it goes on, such a line, then duration is not really involved as measuring or controlling device. But the moment I start cutting this into sections, then I have to deal with different durations. So I cut a melody into different sections and I get durations. This one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And the cutting produces automatically the possibility to separate the fragments of a melody, which means to produce silence. Now I can take this one and then start this one later. See what I mean? Silence is the result of the concept of durations, to deal with durations. That produces silence, to break the time, the flow. Second, I can naturally now, once I have cut something, superimpose. Not just that I separate it, but that I superimpose it. Because these sections become independent. And that produces polyphony. The principle of polyphony and the principle of sound is based on the differentiation of durations. But it's very general, this principle. That's why I say polyphony being the most characteristic articulation, forming of moments which are based on differences of durations. Now let's very quickly analyze what I have done in relating. Once I have separated the characteristics as much as possible, like a purely melodical moment, a purely verticalized moment, Klang moment, sound moment, a purely durational moment, polyphonic moment, I derive from these centers moments which have something in common, more or less, with the others. So there is an M moment which has a component of K. And to be explicit how I did it in Momente, it's about 30%. There is a moment which has a component of D characteristics. The M moment with a small index of K has two possibilities, an M with a capital K, which means they are almost equal in importance with a slight predomination of the M moment, with an index of D, of the durational moments. There is an M and capital K moment which is almost balanced, a balanced combination of M and K with slight, as I say, slight predominance of M. Here in that section you will find exactly the opposite. MK, here you must find a KM, which is here. And here you have an MD small k, so here you must have a KM small d, or a KD small m. And this MD is corresponding to the DM over here. You see, you find now in the different layers of, these are the centers, then moments which are the first generation, always the same characteristics, a D with a DM and a DK, small k, a K with a KM and a KD, an M with an MD and an MK. Which means that starting with the concept, I create moments, I make moments which are as independent as possible. Now I build up a whole tree of different generations by interrelating moments, and I can very carefully control how much they have in common. Rather than starting with the traditional concept of building a continuity and insert breaks, producing sudden changes in order to renew the context. That was the traditional concept of building any continuity, any process. One was composing something very homogeneous and then broke the homogeneity by inserting surprises or contrasts. Whereas we start here with a concept, we begin to think in a concept which is quite the opposite. We start with completely separate instants. Now, I said, in another context, here and now. Now. And then only I begin to determine how much the now may have as memory or hope, which means being related to what has happened before or what will happen next. I should say immediately that the mobility, which I mentioned in the beginning, functions in the following way. The K moments always remain in the center of the work when it is performed. But for a particular performance, the conductor makes a so-called version. He decides upon the order of the moments, which are all available as graphic material. I mean, written out in notes and graphic designs, and in most of the cases each moment is one large page. Speaker of the material aspect. The K moments are always in the center, but the D and M moments can be interchanged, which means we can have all the D moments at the beginning, and then the K, and then the M moments. Then we have moments which are drawn on the board in red color, which are all I moments. We have an I with M characteristics, an I with D characteristics, an I with K characteristics, an I with no particular characteristic, just an I moment. And the I means informal or extremely indeterminate moments. They are fairly vague, static, without direction, neutralizing the large blocks. And they are actually the longest moments in the whole work. And these I moments can equally change their position. The IM and the IK can change their position. The pure I is always at the end, never changes its position. And the idea, ID, is always between these two, which means when M switches, then D is always connected to the M moments. It cannot switch position without that this group changes too. So what happens to the large groups also happens within each group. There is a center, and around this center we have, let's start at the middle, we have the two subgroups that can change position. It's like a mobile. And within each subgroup we have again a center, and the two around it can change position. And here too. Which means we have now a large amount of possibilities of combining these musical moments into a definite version, which means a fixed object for a particular performance or series of performances. And in this work, it is the case that when you change the position, it changes quite a lot, because the characters of the moment differ extremely. So you might have something very slow, where in another version you get something extremely active and fast, which is then balanced much later with its counterpart. What I have said about the central moments, their mobility applies naturally to this group as well, except there is one special arrangement. There is an MM moment, a so-called totally self-related moment, an M which reflects on itself. This is the only moment which is a pure combination of total verticality and horizontality of the melody, which, so to speak, turns upside down. It turns vertical. There's a solo of one voice, always opposed to blocks. I will explain this later, what kind of instruments and voices are used in the different groups. There is an MM. In the third group we have, in order to balance this MM, 4 groups here on top, which the others don't have. Another generation, so to speak. The I moments, I said, last the longest, and they have, if I recall well, a ratio of, I think, 4 to 5 in their duration. Approximately, let's say now, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 1/4 minute, and again 4 to 5, this one. You can calculate this out, it's about 7.5, what is it, 8. Then all these moments here, the D, K, and M, are moments of 2 minutes length in clock time. That duration is a theoretical one. It will change the moment these moments are put into a certain order. Then influences start to work out and change the duration. But they are basically 2 minutes long. And these are all 1 minute long. And these are all half a minute long. And these 4 are 1/4 of a minute each. And they are balanced out with that one, which is 1 minute long. 4 times 1/4 of a minute is balanced out with this 1 minute in time. And what I have said now about the durations also applies to the inner energy that is given by the material and the definition of the activity within each moment. similar procedure. Let's look at the top of the board. In all the M moments, the solo soprano, we come to the material now, A solo soprano is predominating as the most linear sound element in this composition. Then, among the instruments which are used, brass instruments, 4 trumpets and 4 trombones. Then, whenever the solo soprano produces sound, everything that has to do with speaking, also the speaking melodically, etc., is predominating. Then everything that is, and this is clear now after what I have said about heterophony and the horizontal principle, that is randomness within certain limits in time, distribution of elements, of pitches, of timbres, of colors, of durations, randomness is most characteristic for everything that is M, which means the most M moment, the center, will be the moment which is predominantly statistical. Excuse me. Where the elements are distributed with an extreme randomness. The middle group has male voices of a large choir, predominantly. When there's a pure K moment, there are only male voices, and among the instruments, percussion. Percussion of the different groups, the metallophones, large tam-tam, cymbals, and then percussion with fixed pitches of metal, which is the vibraphone. Then skin instruments, also from the most approximate to the most defined pitches, a special drum that I have discovered, a kidney-shaped drum, which permits to produce glissandos on a drum and very precise pitches in a scale. Then, all sorts of instruments that produce sounds like consonants, etc. Then, in the third group, we have predominantly female voices. They must be clear for polyphony. So, in higher regions, where we hear better the lines, the melodies clearly, which are composed polyphonically, and electric organs which can measure the durations without a natural decay of the dynamics, which is the case for brass instruments among these, or voices. The electric organs permit to measure the durations very sharply and clearly. In particular, the ends of each duration. Then singing is predominant, whereas in the middle part, I forgot to say that, whispering, noisy, everything that has to do with whispering. Also now for the choirs, shuffling with the feet, everything that resembles to whispering and noises, or this, or this, everything that resembles to these sounds that go into the direction of voiceless consonants is predominating here. So whenever this occurs here, then we are sure there is an influence. Whereas everything is here, I said, is speaking. From normal, ordinary speaking to the most artificial speaking. And here it's singing. Now you can imagine once you start with, I said irregularity as being one of the characteristics in the field of distribution of elements: statistic, random, periodic, extreme periodicity, regularity, and irregular. I said, now you can imagine once you start with the definition of a certain moment D, small m, then you have, let's say, singing, with a little of whispering or clicking or something that comes from M in here. So we get now influences in very precise dosing. How much from other moments are going to influence this particular one? You can imagine yourself how such a combination can be composed, put together with the different ingredients. So the same applies to rhythmic combinations. For example, when I have a periodic moment K with a small m, then there will be extreme periodicity, and at a moment it starts floating around because there's statistical influence in rhythm from m. And then it goes on periodically. Or they may be superimposed in two layers. One layer has random distribution of elements in time, and there's the predominant layer which is periodic, etc. We might say still something else. There are great contrasts in the first groups of M, contrasts of speeds, of sound and silence, etc. Great contrast in all the different fields, medium contrasts and small contrasts. Then I have drawn green boxes. To each moment belongs a green box, and what is written in these green boxes occurs in the final score, actually on each page. Let's say this is a moment. No, I should make two. MKB, which has these indications. And there's another moment, MK, which has these indications. Let us assume that these moments follow each other, like it is the case in this formal scheme. MKD and MK. Right. And what is in the green box, I have copied over there. Arrows. The arrows mean the following. If an arrow is pointing to the next moment, to the future, to the right side, considering that the horizontal line represents time, earlier, later, then this arrow says, take something out of this moment and put it into the next one. And this is physically done in the following way. Together with each musical moment which is written on a page, there comes a certain number of small papers which have the same name with a small number, and it says insert MKD1, insert MKD2, insert MKD3. These are small pieces of paper, and on each piece there is a certain excerpt copied from the moment itself, and it is an excerpt which is quite characteristic. These are small pieces of paper. They look even physically like this. They come with a score. Let's say a piece would look like this. There's even attached here another piece of paper, and then in each moment there are slits cut in. They come with the score. And when there's an arrow pointing, let's say, to the next one, then you take one which has the same name and put it into the slit of the next one. And then there are a lot of instructions which tell you what's going to happen when this insert is put into that particular moment. Then it has a certain length, it has a certain dynamic curve, it has a certain speed, etc. If it is put into somewhere else, it has another length, another duration, another speed. It is covered by the sounds that are in that particular moment. They are sustained while this insert is put into this moment. I come to this later on. Arrow pointing to the next moment says, take an insert of that particular moment and put it into the next one, following one. An arrow coming at the left side, coming, says take an insert from the previous moment and put it into this one. An arrow coming from the future, if we consider that this is the future, a moment which might follow, because we don't know yet which one will follow until we have made a version. Then it says take an insert from the next one and put it into here. Or here it says take a moment from this one and put it into the two previous ones. So you need two moments, two inserts, one for the previous one and one for the one before the previous one. So all of a sudden, between a moment which doesn't give anything and doesn't take anything, like this one, 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 and like this one, and this one, they are neutral. Between this one extreme of extreme self-containment, if I can say that, not taking and not giving, and the other extreme, that there are moments which are extremely related to their environment, to what happened before and afterwards. Let's say, here, there's such a moment. He takes something from the next one, he takes something from the previous one, he gives himself something from the previous to the previous one, and he gives two inserts to the two following ones. Between such extremes, there are many degrees of interrelations, degrees of connections, which are now determined by me. Now please watch the activities that I have determined. In the M moments, we have, I should start with the middle one. The K moments are all active. There is not a single moment which has an arrow pointing to the moment itself. This one influences the previous one. In this connection, that means here will be a small insert from this one, like an announcement. One doesn't know what it means, and then later on, when this moment comes, I understand, aha, that was an announcement, because now we have more of it. Now it becomes predominating. What was here only something out of the sky, and we didn't know what it meant. That is produced by this arrow. Activity towards the past. Then here, the same activity with a plus and minus. It says, take an insert, put it into the previous moment, which is this one. And then this previous moment must be played once with this insert and once without, plus and minus. So it must be repeated once it is influenced by this one. Neutrality. Here, give something to the previous and something to the following one. All activity goes out of the moments. Here we have moments where all activity draws something into the present moment. And in the first moments we have taking and giving, influencing and being influenced. In each moment. This one I have already discussed. Taking and giving, activity and receptivity. Here the same, taking and giving. Taking and giving to the past. This is opposed to this one. From the future, the next moment. And this taking and giving. We have combinations. And everything that is written now in blue indicates the degree of interrelations between the musical moments. What I have indicated with this sign says what is taken in, slids. This moment must have two slids, though it is neutral, but wherever it is, I have controlled how much it can be influenced in certain environments, so it can, in an extreme position, this you cannot follow so quickly, but you have to believe it, in a certain position, it must take two, then there are two slids, and it must provide one insert for another moment that wants something from this one. So we have receptivity of 2, degree of 2, and activity of 1, influencing others. Here we have taking 3 and preparing for certain connections 2. They are not always used, but I must indicate the extreme positions where there is the maximum of being influenced and influencing others. Here we have taking 2, giving 2, taking 3, giving 3, taking 2, giving 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. Now compare it with this one, 4 and 4, which means this moment, and please realize what I'm going to say now, this moment will be very weak. The strongest moment is the moment which takes the least and gives the least. And the weakest moment, which means the moment which you can in the extreme hardly recognize as a moment, because it has so much in common with what happened before and what's going to happen afterwards, that is a moment which is highly influenced, already announced several times, and still remembered several times. What I say here about musical moments certainly applies to everything, to people too. People who are so much filled with memory and hope hardly exist as individuals, or are so much influenced by others that you don't know what they are any longer. You get confused because you see more reflections in them than what they really are. And this is, for example, another extreme. He doesn't take anything, he doesn't need any slid, but he influences the others. This is a very strong moment compared to others, which are filled with other influences and are remembered and announced many times. Just compare these numbers. When I stopped the degree of influence, nowadays, for example, once this whole, if I can say, way of thinking, of composing, the moment forming has become more natural to me, I can envisage easily musical forms in which, well, let's say everything that has been separated here by a stroke would be an entity of different character. And I would just decide I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 possibilities, that the first one would be extremely active. It could influence all the others. The second one wouldn't do anything. The third one would influence just to the degree of 2. Let's say 1 here, and 1 would be remembered once more. So 1, 2, 3. The third one would have the degree of influence 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There and here something would occur from this moment. You see, you know what I mean? It influences others. So we have the degree of 4, of 2, of 0, and of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you want to serialize the degree of influencing others, just concerning activity, I'm not speaking about receptivity at the moment, and we could continue. We have here 2, 6, then here we have, no, we should do it like this, 6, then 0, 2, 4, so we would have 5 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 more, 5. 6, 0, 2, 5, 4, and let's say 1. This one is just the influence of 1, and it would be very mysterious, and it's just announced 1 in the very beginning, and then nothing occurs for a long time, and then all of a sudden it comes. And only then we begin to, if we still can remember, so this must be very strong, and something very unexpected from this moment. and we have 1. 6, 0, 2, 4, 5, 1, 3. That's what is lacking. So we have 3. Then we have a serial control, so-called serial control, of the interrelation of musical moments. You see, that's the way you could compose whole novels, theater pieces, architecture, anything. The interrelation of certain parts that are as strongly as conceived as strongly as possible, as independent as possible, then afterwards you begin to compose the different degrees of interrelations. What is more interesting now in Momente, this particular composition, is that what happens, I have already mentioned this before, what happens if an insert comes into a moment. Let's say this is a moment, a page, and it would have an arrow here. Draws an insert from the previous one, and then this one would be put into here. You must shout when you cannot read anymore what I'm doing. Then it never happens in moments, in Momente, that it is just mechanically put into a context and nothing has changed. Because the context always changes the duration, which means if an insert from a shorter moment is put into a longer one, then the duration of the insert automatically doubles or quadruples or is eightfold according to the layer into which the insert is put. And if an insert from a longer moment is put into a shorter one, then the tempo is proportionally faster, twice as fast, or 4 times as fast, or 8 times as fast. This can result into a temporal distortion, that's something that lasts, let's say, 2 seconds in its own moment. When it's put into a moment that is 8 times as slow, then it is 16 seconds long, etc. And the vice versa. Something that lasts, let's say, half a minute, a long insert of one of those long I moments, this sometimes happens, and it is extremely long, slow. It is condensed to such an extent that if it comes into one of these, then it is 2, 4, 8, 16 times shorter, etc. And the same, what I'm saying about the durations, applies also to the transformation of the insert by the environment when notes which happen before such an insert in the moment are held over the insert. Then what is happening inside of the insert is transformed by the environment harmonically and melodically. It's covered up, for example. Let's say here were a chord of brass, and here a vocal element is coming in from another moment, male voices. Then the chord of brass is held over this insert and transforms it. Then also the dynamics of each insert are transformed by the environment. I have to say something about the dynamics. The M moments are primarily medium loud. So the pure M moment is medium loud. I have indicated in an index that twice, very short, there should be a fortissimo accent and once a pianissimo insert, because even the pure moments are slightly related to the others. Here we have everything extremely loud as the basic dynamics, and here extremely soft, the pianissimo. The double P is in each moment the predominating dynamics of the D moment. I haven't continued this here for these, but here I have completed the indication. Everything is fortissimo, 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 fortissimo. And then if it is, let's say, a K with a small m, then it is fortissimo with a fraction of the moment, mezzo forte, which comes from here. They are all mezzo forte. Mezzo, medium loud, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, mezzo forte. So naturally, a K with an M has fortissimo with a mezzo forte. And a small index is always indicated by a proportion of 1/7. So the proportion here is 6 to 1 of the total time. 6 portions of the time of that moment are fortissimo, and 1 portion is mezzo forte. Here's the same. And K with a D has fortissimo as the basic dynamics, and 1 portion of the 7, if the total are considered being 7 time units, then 1 of these 7 is pianissimo because of the influence of D, which comes from here. Let's just briefly go through it. I think it's worthwhile. We have mezzo forte, M, and the small k indicates fortissimo, influence from here, in a proportion of 6 to 1. So in this moment, 6, let's say it were 60 seconds long, then 50 seconds, then no, that is difficult. Well, why not? It makes 8.5 or that to make 60 divided by 7. And then 8.5, so which means we have 6, which means 51. We have 51 seconds mezzo forte, and the rest, the 9 seconds, would be fortissimo. Then here we have, for example, the M with the K, which is mezzo forte, with the tendency to K is fortissimo, and a small d, which is pianissimo. So we have 5 to 1 as a proportion, and the 1 must be subdivided again so that the fortissimo is slightly predominating. M and K is mezzo forte, forte, fortissimo. That comes from the K. I subdivided in forte and fortissimo here in order to have a subdivision of 7 units, 4 plus 2 plus 1. 4 to 2 to 1 proportion. M, D, the same, mezzo forte, forte, fortissimo, 4 to 2 to 1. Yes. There you see how even the dynamics and the proportion of the dynamics within each moment are the result of the influences that I have defined by the genesis of these layers of moments. I would say, before I say a few more words about the other characteristics of momente, we hear the first half of the recording. Up to now, there have been performances, several performances, which I have all conducted. And all the D moments have not yet been performed. They will be performed at the end of this year in the first total performance of the total work. The work lasts an hour and a half, and in 1965 I conducted the last performances of Momente on a tour, and we performed up to here. There was no time at that time to perform to rehearse the whole work. This year we will have for the first time the possibility to perform the whole work. And actually the performance that I conducted is in this order. That's why I wrote it in this order. The next performance that I'm going to conduct at the end of this year will change this order. I put the moments in a different order. And the tape now stops after 30 minutes, about 30 minutes, I think 29 and a half minutes, right here, before this moment. There. And then the continuation of the tape on the second tape begins with this moment and then goes up to here. And instead of the IK moment, but that doesn't mean very much to you, the I moment is here, and the IK moment has never been performed yet. So the end, always is the end, and in this particular performance comes here.